It's amazing what they would make an animated series from AKAPAD. We often hear Rainbow, First Blood, RoboCop. How did they make that? Even Chuck Norris. How did they make all that for kids back in the 80s? Well, the true expansion of adult themes in children's animation comes in the 90s, and it arrives to this series, the 1996 Mortal Kombat Defenders of the Realm, made for kids from a video game so violent it triggered congressional hearings. It almost brought down the entire video game industry. We have an introduction of who I consider to be the true villain of the Mortal Kombat series until recent history. Quan Chi. Quan Chi makes his first appearance in this series. 13 episodes, USA Network, Sunday mornings, and all systems are go. So for today's Animation Saturday, we're discussing Mortal Kombat Defenders of the Realm. Let's go, AKAPAD.
Quiet on the set.
Camera speed.
Sound production, take 1.
Action!
And welcome back to the podcast of podcasts. I am your host, Peter A. DeLuca. This is AKAPAD's The Film Buff podcast. On the weekends, we do cartoons, we do animation. Just because I gotta let my mind wander. I gotta get into other things. For a long time, AKAPADers, I said I would not do animation. I did every once in a while. Every time I did it, I kind of whined. But we're doing it, and I'm enjoying it. Because I remember watching this. Catching a couple episodes here and there, but by this time in my life, I was drifting way out of not drawing, not creating, but just the general grind of film study, comic book study. I would still go to Barnes & Noble and Borders. I would still collect books and read books. Never collect a book you don't intend to read. So I wasn't completely out of the culture, but it wasn't until later that a friend of mine kind of came out of nowhere asking me about Spawn. And his admiration for Spawn got me, it pretty much got me back for a little bit. But then at that point I was in, we can just say full adulthood, and I was out. I just still drew though. Mortal Kombat is a franchise I was there for ground zero, for the beginning of. Recently on this podcast, a couple episodes ago, we did a discussion on Mortal Kombat 2021, the movie that dropped on HBO Max during COVID. I consider that one of the great film franchise reboots of all time. It is as good as anything. I love the concepts. I love what they do in that movie. That movie has grit and it has balls, which is everything you expect from the Mortal Kombat franchise. The Mortal Kombat franchise was in such a lull, media-wise, not video game-wise, because the video game storyline might be the greatest video game storyline in history. Everything from Mortal Kombat 1 to Mortal Kombat X links, it loops. We're in time displacement. By the time we get to the most recent stuff, we're in an alternate reality, but we're also just moving forward. We're not doing a lot of callbacks. This is just something new. This is the way how some of this stuff should be done. One of the few times it actually works, when we time travel and dimension hop. During this time, Mortal Kombat needed fandom. The fans are the ones that came in. Did a short film. The short film was with Michael Jai White, I believe, as Jax, but it was a short film. Might have been called Mortal Kombat Resurrection. I spoke about it previously. I just had to look it up real quick. That was called Mortal Kombat Rebirth. Mortal Kombat Rebirth, fan made, Michael Jai White. That sparks Mortal Kombat Legacy. And then from that point on, there was, if you want to call it, a true position for the franchise, which took away the insane fantasy elements, put it back on Earth, even when it was in Outer Realm, but it boiled it down to realism. And Legacy lit the world on fire. I remember when I started my gig in Philly, I would sneak watch some of those episodes at my desk, just because I was so into it. I really was. And I was enthralled. I was just enthralled that the lore was just here. It was explained. It was easy to follow. The relationships were there. The highlighting of characters and little, like some of the B-list and the C-list characters. Everything just seemed to have a moment. And the fighting wasn't too bad. Like all these things. But Mortal Kombat Legacy set the stage for the movie that came out a couple of years ago. The sequel, I think the sequel's this year, early next year. I don't think it's December, actually. But it's got to be next year. It's got Carl Urban as Johnny Cage. The two things that people forget, the two pieces, well, the three major pieces of content that are memory hold when it comes to expanding and boiling down the lore of Mortal Kombat is Mortal Kombat Conquest. That's the live action TV series where a lot of individuals say has a perfect ending. Mortal Kombat Defenders of the Realm, today's subject, and the Malibu Comics series where they went into Sonya Blade. And somewhat similarly metaphor, Sonya Blade had her own team, kind of like Cammy had her own team in Street Fighter 2. Both of those characters are sexy blondes that wear green. Coincidence? I don't know. I think they're pretty purposeful on the Mortal Kombat side. They will steal, they'll borrow, they'll give their nods, but they'll do what they want with those concepts. And I think Sonya Blade is a direct retaliation to Cammy, and Cammy's origin in Street Fighter 2 is complicated. But the Mortal Kombat lore, it's maybe the best since, or the best ever, second to Warhammer 40k. Halo to me would be like number 3. Dune would be number 4. And the great thing about Mortal Kombat is we get to trace it. We really get to build a comprehensive timeline. Some of it is because it's not a lot of stuff compared to, let's just say, Superman, where a new comic book every single month, sometimes 5 new comic books every single month, for 10 years straight overall, for 50 years straight. Like, it's just so much stuff. And then you get the movies, a radio show, multiple series, Superboy, Superman and Lois. I mean, it's to string it all together and point the influences out, and when things shift and move, right? Like, it can get crazy, and it is crazy. But for Mortal Kombat, thank God it's streamlined, because we get this episode 2. What was it? Scorpion Sting of the Scorpion. This is the episode that everybody wants. This series is a stylistic continuation of that first movie, that 1995 movie. So we try and get a little bit of that club beats, the club music. We try and get these hyper fights that we got with Paul W. Anderson directing that first movie. The music, all of it. Sting of the Scorpion gives a nod to that movie. We get into the lore of Scorpion. We get into the rivalry with Sub-Zero. The first episode, we have the introduction of Sub-Zero's brother, who is the Sub-Zero of the entire series. People do forget that the original Sub-Zero perishes in the first Mortal Kombat. And then we get to episode 8. Quan Chi, who I consider to be the villain of the franchise. I know a lot of you guys want to go to that first movie, that first villain, that first video game, and Shang Tsung, the soul-stealing, shape-shifting, I'm going to do your moves guy. He's hard to beat, too. I don't think I ever beat him in Mortal Kombat 1. His villainy sets the stage for Liu Kang. But the true horror of Quan Chi is he's the underworld. It's really his desires, his motivations that run the backstory for the continuing games and a lot of these other things that we see. Shao Kahn becomes a new emperor, but he is comic book. Quan Chi is the villain. He first appears in this series in episode 8. Everything I'm telling you, and I was going to wait a little bit to reveal it, everything here is available on YouTube. You can watch all these episodes for free on YouTube. By the time we wrap this series up, we have Katana basically overthrowing some of the underworld. She's rebellious. Underworld is rising up. And the whole arc of these 13 episodes is a storyline really not detailed anywhere else. The underworld fracturing, having a civil war, somewhat touched on some of the games, but here it's almost like this is the underworld revolution for 13 episodes. There's elements here that get carried on, and it makes Defenders of the Realm absolutely significant. Also, if you guys are into voice talents, Clancy Brown from Earth 2 fame is Raiden. We have Dorian Harwood as Jax. You've seen him in a million things. We have Luke Perry as Sub-Zero. Then we have Ron Perlman as Curtis Stryker. I love the choice of the team, the choice of the characters in this. I love it that what's his? I want to say Timberwolf. Nightwolf. Nightwolf he's mostly at a computer desk the entire time. And the whole theme of this show is, they're breaking the rules. Portals are opening. Raiden's powerless in Outer World. He has power on Earth. He helps direct them, but a portal opens. The team races there. Great formula for an animated TV series. I just want to make a note that this series is also it's a part of a good forgotten stretch. I'm talking Phantom 2020. I'm talking the Highlander animated series. And this is also somewhat of the tail end of the Saturday morning, Sunday morning shows. Wildcats, 1 season. I believe 2 seasons from Eric Larson's Savage Dragon. SWAT Cats, I believe 30 episodes. Biker Mice from Mars. Exo Squad, which is the true masterpiece of everything. There's a lot of one and dones during this stretch. This is the end of Saturday morning cartoons. This is also the end of syndication, which was the Sunday morning cartoons. The show hasn't resonated. It hasn't lived on. So sometimes on this podcast it's hey, let's get people watching this. Let's get people discussing Mortal Kombat Defenders of the Realm, because I feel like this series is there. And if you're just into connecting dots, watch that first movie, then watch this, and then watch that second movie, and see how much of it carries over to number 2. Some of it does, believe it or not. I think some of the Shao Kahn stuff does carry over. So, AKAPAD, check it out for Saturday morning cartoons. Mortal Kombat Defenders of the Realm. One hell of an effort. These are great episodes. They really are. Let's go.
Okay, that's a wrap.